Hey guys, Chris here with Busted Knuckle DIY, and today we've got a '07 Camry that is in desperate need of a wheel bearing. So before you go to a shop and spend 500 bucks on it, let me show you what you need to know.
Oh hell, I can fix that. Honey! Can you bring me a Band-Aid, please?
Alright guys, I've already saved you the agony of pulling a wheel off because, to be perfectly candid, if you can't pull a tire off, you really don't have much chance of doing a wheel bearing. So we're going to move along. We're going to go ahead and get the caliper and bracket off. We're going to get the ABS sensor off of it, get the rotor out of here, and I'm going to show you guys how to do this without removing the entire hub from the car so we can avoid a trip to the front end shop. Anyway, let's get wrenching. Alright guys, you can see we got the caliper and brake assembly off, and that's super easy. There's two 17mm bolts on the back side. We just took the entire bracket off. And let me move you up here. You can see we've got that hung up to the strut spring with just a little piece of mending plate here to keep pressure off of our flex hose. Now we're going to turn the wheel the other way and pull this ABS sensor out. Alright guys, forgive me for holding the light on it here, but right here, this hole, okay, is for the ABS sensor. It's held in place by a single 10mm bolt. Take that out, give it a jiggle, and then remove the clip, hang it up with your caliper. Now we're going to try to get the rotor off here. Sometimes you have to use screws to kind of jack them off. We're going to try a little blunt force trauma and see if it works. Alright, so rotor's on here. They stick pretty good. They get a little rust on them and whatnot. There's two holes here that are threaded you can jack a screw into and jack this thing off. But I found that a good size sledge works. Don't hit the face of your rotor if you're going to reuse it. That's going to destroy it. So we're going to be hitting in here between the studs on it a few good times and see if we can't get this thing to let go. So, here we go. Still stuck. You can see the rust kind of flying out, or maybe you can on camera, as I'm beating on this thing. We'll keep going with it until we get it off, guys. All right, guys, rotor's off. No real problems there. Like I said, a little blunt force trauma works pretty well on these occasions. So a few good wraps with a heavy hammer, and typically these things will let go for you. All right, so now our next step here is we're going to go ahead and remove the axle nut. This is a 30mm 12 point on these Toyotas. Be sure to look up the specs for your model. So anyway, we're going to grab the impactor and see if we can get that bad boy off of there. Okay, spindle nut's off. Now, what we're going to do, guys, is thread it back on there, by hand until it's flush, more or less, with the end of the axle shaft. Sorry, didn't mean to knock y'all around here. But yeah, we're going to thread that baby until it's dead flush. All right, and we're going to take a real heavy hammer and smack the end of the axle and start it getting loose from the hub assembly. So anyway, blunt force trauma again. Here we go. Yep, that popped it. First go. So now we can take it the hell off of there and we're good. So anyway, now we're moving on to the steering knuckle. All right, guys, so now we're on to the steering knuckle. There's a cotter pin in the bottom of it that you have to get out. Okay, no biggie. Bend that bad boy around, get it out of there. The nut's a 17mm. I've taken it off and then put a little weasel piss on there, a little deep creep here, and threaded it back on by hand. Again, the same thing. We're going to use blunt force trauma to get this ball joint to let go. So that way we can freely steer the hub without, my brother having to get in the car, 150 times. So we're going to take a heavy, heavy hammer and hit it right here. And normally 4 or 5 good whacks and the ball joint will just pop. But anyway, let's give it a shake. Yep, came right out, guys. We left the nut on flush just like we did last time. Whacked it right here with good old BAH. For those of you that are like me and good old redneck boys, that stands for big ass hammer. Gave it a few good whacks. It popped right loose. So now we can actually rotate the hub by hand. And we're just about ready to go ahead and get the press puller on here and start yanking this spindle assembly out. But what we got to do, and thank you, Toyota, for being fucking awesome. Under here, and I know you can't see them, the lower ball joint is held on by 3 bolts on these cars. Okay, we got 1 bolt and 2 nuts. They're all 17mm. We're going to crack those loose and let that lower control arm go. And then I'll show you guys how to get the axle through the hub assembly without pulling these upper bolts, and avoid that trip to the front end shop, because we don't want to mess with these 22 mils if we can avoid it. All right, guys, those 317 mils came off no problem. We have dropped the lower control arm. You can see we're free here. So what we're going to do is push the axle back, and we've got enough flex in the strut to pull the axle through, which is all we want to do. So you got to man up a little here. But there it is, right there. There's the end of the axle. That's all we got to do. Now we're going to go ahead and get our press puller and yank this spindle through here. So let me get that and get it set up, and I'll show you what we got going on. All right, guys, this is a mobile wheel bearing puller. You can get this at most auto parts stores. They'll be happy to rent it to you. It's a very expensive tool if you have to buy it, so just rent the damn thing. This is a 15/16. On the back side here, hopefully you can see, I got my big old adjustable wrench on the nut here that I have lined up with the inner bearing race. So we're going to crank this around and try to pull that spindle through. And the reason we have to do it, well, I'll get back to you on that, because there's a big-ass C-clip in there that will hold the whole bearing in, so we have to literally take the bearing out in pieces. But anyway, I'm going to start impacting the crap out of this and see if we can get it to break loose. All right, guys, there's the spindle. It yanked right through. Pulled the inner race with it. So you're going to have to use, I like to use a Dremel with a metal wheel to cut this down real fine, and then take a chisel and pop it and get it off the spindle in preparation to the new bearing. Guys, I want to apologize to you. My camera literally crapped out and died. I actually had to have it replaced. This happened just a meager 3 steps away from final disassembly on doing this wheel bearing project here. So I feel really bad about that I can't get it on film. But that said, I can get you through it. So what we're going to do, we're going to come over here behind me to what I call the whiteboard of knowledge. I'm going to illustrate it out for you, those final 3 steps of disassembly, and then just talk you through the reassembly, which is the reverse. And hopefully, you feel good about giving this a shot for yourself. Again, I apologize, and sorry we have to resort to this method. But, hey, it is what it is. Anyway, let's go to this whiteboard and get this thing done. Okay, first things first. You guys saw the spindle come out, and the inner race of the wheel bearing was still pressed onto it. And I mentioned that I was going to use a Dremel and my chisel to get it off, so I actually still have the inner race. I held onto it. Hopefully it shows up on camera. You can see what I did with the Dremel. I cut into this bad boy, and I took a big piece of the meat out. Now, if you nick the spindle, guys, that's perfectly okay. It's not going to hurt anything. Don't freak out. Don't saw your spindle in half, but like I said, if you get a little nick on it, don't have a heart attack. Once you get it, the biggest part of the meat cut out, take you a chisel like this, or a big standard screwdriver, set it in between the two, start tapping it with a hammer, and what will happen, and hopefully I can do it here for you on camera, is it will break. And if you look right there at the base, as I'm pulling on it here, you can see the crack. So it popped, and then I just took my chisel and shimmied it up off of that spindle. Pretty easy, guys. It just takes a couple of minutes of your time. Anyway, let's get on the whiteboard, and I'll show you the final 3 steps in that disassembly. Okay, here we are on the whiteboard of knowledge. So let's talk about those last disassembly steps and how to put everything back together. So I've got an illustration here. First, forgive my wretched artwork. If you want it fixed, you call a mechanic. If you want it pretty, you call an artist. I am definitely the aforementioned. I am a mechanic, not an artist. I know it ain't pretty, but that's okay. The representation's here, and that's all we're going to need. So, coming down right, here's your strut. Right, here's the coil spring going around it. Here's the hub bolted up. These are the 2 big 22mm bolts that we don't want to mess with, because that's what they use to adjust the angle of your hub to help set your vertical alignment. Right? This is the back side of the hub, right, closest to the engine. This is the front side of the hub, right? The spindle came out that way, right, because the tire sets right here. Here's a representation of the axle that was going through the whole deal. Now, we've already pulled that and got it out of the way. So, to complete your disassembly, okay, on the back side of the hub, closest to the engine, I'm going to illustrate this in green, so hopefully it shows up better. There's a spring steel ring, okay? Take a wide tip standard screwdriver, pry bar, whatever you got to do, and just start jimmying that thing out of there. There's a good lip on it, so you can get a piece of it and take it out. Going that way. Okay? The only thing you need to know about that ring, and I'll try to draw it out for you. Again, I'm sorry. But it looks more or less like that. There's a hole in it. Right there. Okay? That hole lines up with the one that I showed you earlier in the video when I reviewed the footage. It showed it pretty good with the hole for the ABS sensor. So when you put it back in, you absolutely have to make sure that the two holes line up, or what's going to happen is your ABS sensor, which would go in like right there. Here's the little 10mm bolt hole. If these holes don't line up, that ABS sensor will not read properly, and you'll immediately get an ABS light on your car. So when you go to put this bad boy back in there, just make sure that the hole in the spring steel cover ring lines up with the hole in the hub. Okay? Behind this stainless steel ring, okay, is that big giant snap ring that I talked about. It's a big one, guys. So what you're going to have to do is get your snap ring pliers in there, press it down. Normally, you got to take like a little screwdriver or two and get behind after you free it up and work around it till you can jimmy it out of there. I'm going to highly recommend to anybody here to wear safety glasses when you do it. I've had these rings pop out of there. It's spring steel. It's under a lot of tension. And if it flies out of there and hits you in the face, it hurts. And yes, I know from experience. So please be extra cautious when you pop that ring. Once you pop this snap ring that's right in here out of there, cream cheese. Guys, set your press up and drive what's left of your wheel bearing out that way towards the engine. That's it. That's the only 3 steps that we didn't get on film for you. Hopefully, you're understanding what I'm telling you here, and you feel pretty good about that. As far as the reassembly goes, it's the exact opposite. Right, we've got a bare hub, so we're going to pull our new wheel bearing in, put our snap ring back in, go ahead and put our spring steel collar back in, again, lining those holes up, okay? So, we're good. We're going to take the press and take the spindle, right? And here's that with all its little lug studs, and yes, again, it's bad work, guys, but bear with me. And we're going to press it in to the new bearing. You just want to make sure that it's flush on the backside. You don't have to do anything fancy. Okay, at that point, go ahead and put your axle through. Reset your lower ball joint. In this case, like I said, the 3 17mm fasteners. So like I said, 1 bolt and 2 nuts. Line them up, drop them in place. You just kind of put the axle through. Line all that back up. Put your axle nut on. Torque it down. On this particular car, it's 168 foot-pounds. More or less, you really can't over-torque that axle nut. So you'll go to town on it when you do this. Put your steer knuckle back on. Put your rotor, your brake caliper back on it, exactly the way they came off. Put your tire back on, and you're done. We took the car out for a drive. I've got some footage for you from after that. Guys, it was beautiful, not making that horrible, low, growling, metallic sound that is very common for wheel bearings, and I couldn't be happier with the job. Again, sorry the camera crapped out, but hopefully this gets you through it. New wheel bearing? The sounds of silence. Gotta love it. Guys, don't pay big money at the shop to do this when you can do it yourself. Alright guys, sorry that we had to resort to the whiteboard of knowledge to finish the video out. That's not what I wanted, but obviously the difficulties that I had with my camera, life is life. However, hopefully you got enough out of it to feel confident enough to go ahead and proceed with a job like this yourself. The wheel bearing for that particular car at any auto part store is about 45 bucks. The puller press tool that we used at most auto part stores, you got to check with them ahead of time because some stores have it, some don't. But what they'll do, they'll put a hold on your card for the amount that the tool would cost new in case it doesn't come back. But when you return it, they give you that money. So the tool doesn't cost you anything. So for 45 bucks and about an hour and a half of our time, we spared ourselves a $500 trip to the mechanic. Guys, that's really good money for your time. It's not that difficult a job. And I know I truly am. I'm hopeful that you got enough out of the video the way it ended up working out to feel confident about doing it yourselves. If you haven't done it yet, guys, hit that subscribe button. Turn on all notifications, as we got some pretty cool content coming up. Some videos that I think will help you out here in the future. Hit that like button. It really helps us out. In the description box below, I'm going to put links to our email address if you want to drop us a line, and links to our Facebook page. Be sure to check that out. Guys, till next time, this is Chris for Busted Knuckle DIY saying, keep wrenching.